Hello and welcome to Innovative Volunteer Recruitment. I'm Andy King with the VISTA Training Unit, and I'll be the host for today's session. We have a few other team members supporting us today. I'm joined by Jess Knight and Andy Clark at Education Northwest, and they'll be helping me to monitor the Q&A and chat panels to make sure that we can answer your questions during today's session. And our producer today is Sam Graziani at JBS. We have three speakers today, Erin Barnhart, Salome Clark, and Rob Hemphill. After an overview of the session, I'm going to be doing some further introductions. So let's take a look at what we hope you'll gain from this webinar. By the end of the session, we hope that you'll be able to apply the foundational practices for effective volunteer recruitment in your own volunteer recruitment efforts. We hope you'll discover some emerging trends in volunteering that have implications for volunteer recruitment and outreach. And finally, we hope you'll be able to determine which audiences and which outreach methods are most appropriate for your specific volunteer positions. And in terms of today's agenda, we'll start with a review of the fundamentals of effective volunteer recruitment that you learned at pre-service orientation. And we'll hear from a current VISTA member on how she has been applying these practices in her VISTA project. We'll then look at some emerging trends in volunteer recruitment, and we'll hear from a recent VISTA alum about which volunteer recruitment practices have been effective for various programs that he has worked with. Then we'll give you a chance to practice applying some of the concepts that you've just learned about innovative volunteer recruitment. We'll share some next steps and additional resources, and then we'll get to your questions. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our lead presenter for today's session. Dr. Erin Barnhart is a nationally known expert in the field of volunteer management. She's the founder and president of Effective Altruism, LLC, as well as Director of Operations for the American Gap Association. She serves on the Board of Directors for the Building Bridges Coalition, on the Oregon Committee on Volunteerism, and is an online instructor for the Volunteer Mobilization course of the VISTA Blend. Erin is also an adjunct professor at the University of Oregon and at Concordia University, Portland. And if all that weren't enough, Erin served as an AmeriCorps member with the National Civilian Community Corps. Erin?
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much. And hello to everyone on the call. I'm very happy to be here. This topic is near and dear to my heart, so I'm very excited to be presenting today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to ask a quick question of everyone on the call. Specifically, how much experience do you have recruiting volunteers? You'll see that question pop up on your screen, and there's a poll there. You'll have about a minute to respond, and you'll see that there's 4 options for an answer. You have a lot of experience recruiting volunteers, you have some experience, you might have a little experience, or you might have no experience at all. Now, all 4 of these, you're going to be able to find something to take away from today's webinar. If you have a lot of experience, then hopefully you'll be able to identify a few new ways that you haven't used before. If you have some or a little, chances are there are going to be quite a few things on the call today that could be really useful for you in your work. And if you're brand new to this, we're going to go over a little bit of the fundamentals to give you a quick reminder of what you learned in your PSO, and then get you ready to do some innovative volunteer recruitment out in the field. So I'm looking forward to seeing those responses when they come up, but I'm also excited today just to simply talk about what we mean by innovative volunteer recruitment, thinking of new ways in which we can talk to our audience, reach out to find the people who might be the best fit for our particular volunteer roles, use some innovative tools. So here we go. We've got our results here, and it looks like by far the biggest group is some experience. We also have quite a few folks with a little experience, quite a few with none, and the smallest group is the folks with a lot of experience. Now, if only we had names attached to that so that everybody could shoot them a quick email when they have questions. But until then, we're going to see how we do on the call today, and we'll cover quite a bit of information for you. So let's talk about successful volunteer programs. Now, before we talk about those innovative methods, it is important to touch briefly on the foundations of effective volunteer management. As you remember from your PSO, there are 6 steps to a successful volunteer program. There is planning, outreach and recruitment, screening and matching, training and support, monitoring and evaluation, and sustaining. You might remember an activity where you worked with a group to organize all of the steps in volunteer program management into this framework. And in today's webinar, we're going to focus especially on that second element of outreach and recruitment. A quick note that you do need to be sure you have your foundational volunteer recruitment documents and policies in place before you begin outreach. This includes such things as having an application form, a plan for managing your applications, following up with your applicants, policies for how to assess the fit of a potential volunteer, including how to say yes or no to an applicant. And then again, this is in addition to having systems in place for interviewing applicants, screening and matching, training and orientation, et cetera. So we're going to look at outreach and recruitment. Again, you might recall from PSO that within this area of outreach and recruitment, there were several tasks. There's identifying specific volunteer needs. What skills, abilities, and background experiences are you seeking in volunteers? There's developing volunteer task descriptions that spell out the qualifications, activities, benefits, time commitment, and other expectations. There's developing a targeted recruitment plan. Where are the people with the qualities you're seeking? Where can I find them? There's developing a plan for marketing the program, and then there's the actual act of marketing your volunteer opportunities, putting them in places where you'll find your target volunteers. I presented a webinar last year on creating volunteer position descriptions that appeal and engage, which touches on those first 2 bullet points. Before you get to the outreach and recruitment phase, you'll want to be sure you've identified what you need volunteers to do and have those written, clear, and specific position descriptions. If you want to check out that webinar, you'll find it on the Vista campus. In today's, though, we're going to focus on the last 3 bullets and talk about some new ways to reach your intended audience. But before we dive into those trends, let's briefly go over some of the fundamentals of volunteer recruitment. First, it's important to always consider the requirements of the position before you begin the recruitment process. For example, what knowledge or skills or experience is required of the ideal candidate? What time commitment are you requesting? What interests and motivations might they have that best align with this position? There's also a couple of key questions you'll want to ask. Let's imagine we're looking for someone to help us with our social media and marketing. First of all, what audiences might be the best potential fit for this position? Chances are you're going to identify several potential audiences who could fit well. College students, professionals with marketing or social media experience, who are either looking for work or might want to practice their skills in a different environment, retirees with a marketing background. Brainstorm the kinds of audience you want to reach out to for your specific position. And then think about where you can find these audiences. If you're seeking to connect with retired seniors with marketing experience, what locations might you seek out? How about college students? Consider the many ways someone might connect with your organization's needs and want to help, and then think about where you might find them. The next thing you're going to want to look at is how you might best communicate with your audience. What methods should you use for your recruitment? Is it going to be online, in person? Are you going to use flyers or handouts? Remember to keep your targeted audience in mind. Where are they going to see it? What methods are likely going to connect with them in the community? If I'm seeking to connect with college students, I might go straight to the local university's marketing department and ask if they can send out a targeted email message for me. Or if I can come into a few classes and introduce myself and the position to them in the room. I might also want to post it in the University Volunteer Center or Career Center. Lastly, you'll want to consider the kind of tone you'll use. Will it be serious, lighthearted, professional, humorous? You can share the same position in very different ways that will appeal to very different audiences. If I want to appeal to professionals with marketing experience, I'm likely going to use a more serious professional tone. Alternatively, if I'm posting a position that's all about having fun, I'm likely going to use a very different style, something much more informal and lighthearted. Now, we posted a question for you to answer while you waited for the webinar to start, and I had you think about a volunteer recruitment post that appealed to you and then shared what made it memorable. And I saw some great comments up there of, the ones that really caught my eye were the ones that said that there was a unique way for me to contribute. I saw someone say, hey, when there's free stuff, I'm interested. So you never know what's going to appeal to your audience, but every one of us probably have an example of a volunteer position that caught our eye. So think about that and seek to do the same in your own posts. Again, keeping in mind who your audience is, where you're going to be posting your message, and how you're going to be getting the message to them. Now I want to share 2 examples with you. This first one is a position description using a serious tone. 1 in 3 children go hungry in Douglas County. You can help change this. This starts off on a very serious note. It provides a statistic. It grabs your attention right away to talk about the problem, and then it immediately seeks to engage them. The tone is pretty straightforward. You don't see a lot of adjectives. You see pretty straightforward discussion. Help families make healthy choices, get access to the food they need. Shifts are flexible. Benefits are to get to know fellow community members, learn more about nutrition and food systems. And it ends with the appeal to ask and where to go for more information. Again, very straightforward, very serious tone. Now let's look at it with a lighter tone. This time my target audience is going to be people who love food or foodies. Are you the type of person who dreams about pancakes? Is lunch your favorite time of day? We need local foodies to help us sort food and design menus at the Food Bank of Douglas County. We use a few more adjectives in here. We have delicious and dream-inspiring food. Shifts are flexible, and benefits include getting to know fellow food lovers, learning more about nutrition and food systems, bring your passion for all things culinary. This is the exact same position that I'd advertised before, but I'm using a different tone based on my audience. So these are the kinds of things you want to keep in mind. Who are you trying to talk to? There's a common refrain in the marketing world that says if you try to talk to everyone, you'll end up talking to no one. So when we do this, we want to think, who are our audiences and how do we best talk to them? So now let's talk about a few good rules of thumb. First, every time you post a recruitment message, be sure you're attempting to speak to that specific audience with language, media, and location specific to them. If I want to talk to college students, think about how I'm going to appeal to college students. If I want to talk to seniors with a marketing background, think about how I'm going to talk to them. Do this for every potential audience, and there probably will be several for any given role. Second, don't post the exact same message everywhere. Instead, customize it or translate it for different audiences, locations, tones, and the way that you're posting it. This doesn't mean you have to rewrite it entirely every time, but you do need to mix it up just a little bit so it doesn't look like the exact same message everywhere. The reason for not doing that is you may end up with an ineffective message if it looks the exact same in many different places. Something that translates really well to social media may not look great on a flyer, and something you posted on an email may not look good on a handout. Also, if people are seeing your one exact position with the same description posted everywhere, they may think that's the only thing you have available, and you want them, of course, to know that there are many different ways they can get involved. Third, remember that your position description and your recruitment message are different tools with different goals, tones, and structures. Your position description provides the complete picture of a position, from potential tasks and activities to qualifications to time requirements. The tone is straightforward, almost never first person, and the structure uses lots of headings and bullet points over the course of 1 to 2 pages. Alternatively, a recruitment message should be really brief, 1 to 2 paragraphs. It should be compelling, and it should speak directly to the potential audience. They should be reading it as though you're speaking to them. And then finally, it's a really good idea to evaluate your successes and your not-so-successes as you engage in volunteer recruitment. Did you get a lot of inquiries from one message but none from the other? Spend some time assessing the differences between the two. Maybe you used a humorous tone in one while the other was more serious. Maybe it was where you posted it. One was on social media and the other was on flyers distributed at local grocery stores. Pay attention to where you've had success and then seek to repeat those achievements elsewhere. So keep in mind these various rules of thumb, because we're going to come back to these later in the session.
Now we're going to hear from our first guest speaker, Salome Clark. Salome Clark currently serves as an AmeriCorps Vista member at Habitat for Humanity of Denton County, Texas. You may be familiar with Habitat for Humanity, an international nonprofit organization that focuses on eliminating poverty and homelessness by providing low to moderate income families a hand up towards home ownership. Salome has been working on developing a comprehensive volunteer program at her service site and has some insights to share based on her own experiences so far. Salome?
Thank you, Andy. I'm glad to share my experiences with you today. I serve as the volunteer coordinator here at the Denton affiliate of Habitat for Humanity. I've been working here since August of 2014, and my term of service will end in less than a month. My VAD consists of developing a volunteer program and standard operating procedures, SOP, manual for the administrative office. To date, I have recruited about 158 volunteers that help with office tasks, special events, various aspects of store operations at our restore location, on construction labor that Habitat is widely known for. Most people are only familiar with the actual home building. I had to get really creative when thinking about how to find volunteers to fill positions that required specific personality traits, skill sets, and time commitments. I have had success posting positions on online volunteer databases like Volunteer Match. This is great for finding volunteers with specific skills. You can add keywords for the skills, experience, and personality traits that you'd like the ideal volunteers to have. You're more likely to get inquiries from those individuals who have those particular traits. I was looking for volunteers to serve as crew leaders on the construction site. Crew leaders have to be skilled in at least one area of construction listed on the volunteer application, cabinetry, flooring, sheetrock, etc. They must attend a crew leader training with the construction manager and be available to train unskilled individuals. Crew leaders should also be comfortable supervising others. Volunteer Match recommended that I use a fun volunteer position title, so I have the position listed as have construction experience, lead a team of volunteers. I continued with the fun and laid-back theme for the actual volunteer description. This is a screenshot of the position. It reads, do you enjoy working with your hands, supervising others? Do you have experience with home construction? Be a leader at a construction site. We need you to help supervise our volunteer groups and show them the ropes. Busy on weekends? No problem. Work during the week with our core construction team and help move the house along and build lifelong friendships. Under the Skill Select section on Volunteer Match, I made sure to mention that I was looking for volunteers that had experience with home renovation, building architecture, and other ways I have reached potential volunteers was through community. Most colleges and universities have a department whose sole purpose is to connect university students with volunteer opportunities. They typically send out a newsletter every so often to alert students about local volunteer happenings in the area. Sometimes these alerts are weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. I send volunteer postings out to them as often as they come up, but mainly general labor for Saturday builds or the restore, since the hours there are more flexible to accommodate student schedules. College students also tend to volunteer as part of a group. Here is an example of the language I used in the service department ad. Come build with us. Habitat for Humanity of Denton County is seeking at our build site on the following Saturdays. I also mentioned we have 2 shifts available, 8 a.m. to noon or 1 to max of 30 volunteers for each shift, and lunch will be provided between shifts. I made sure to include specific dates, the time commitment, and that lunch will be provided since college students are always hungry. Our local newspaper has a section called the Community Corner, where you can post a short blurb about community events. It's free for nonprofits to post things. I use this method mainly to spread awareness about our organization. Most people are familiar with Habitat for Humanity, and we did receive some calls from interested volunteers. And on the right hand section of the screen, you can see an example of the language I used in the local newspaper ad. Do you enjoy working with your hands, supervising others? Do you have experience with home construction? Come out and lead at a construction site. The following volunteer positions are available on the Habitat construction team, and I've got house leader, crew leader, family services liaison, and meal snack provider. The third way I have reached out to volunteers is through internships and targeting specific school departments. The University of North Texas, a local university, has a technical communication department. One of the tasks in my VAD was to create a standard operating procedure manual for each position in the office. I made a dent in the SOP for my particular position, but doing one for the entire office proved to be a daunting task. I met an alum of the technical writing program at a networking event, and he recommended that I reach out to the director of technical communications at UNT. This director has worked with Habitat for Humanity of North Collin County on consolidating task instructions and parts of an SOP manual. Each semester, her students partner with a nonprofit or business so that her students can get experience working with a real-life client. I showed her what I had so far, and she plans to turn it into a project for her students to work on for the next couple of semesters. That's all I have for today. Back to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Salome. Those are great examples and tips. I really appreciate you sharing them. We're going to turn now and discuss some emerging trends in volunteer recruitment. And the first few relate to volunteer characteristics, or specifically your audience. The first of these is skill-specific service. Increasingly, savvy volunteers are seeking to use their existing skill sets in their volunteer service. Where volunteers in the past might have been more willing to just pitch in wherever they were needed, today's volunteers increasingly want to engage their specific talents to help the organization move towards its mission. Now, the challenging news here is that it can sometimes be a bit difficult to match those specific volunteer skills with what your organization needs. The benefit, though, is that when this match is made, it is more likely to result in a positive volunteer experience, and research has shown often greater volunteer retention. In terms of recruitment, this means that volunteer managers need to highlight opportunities for skill development, as well as emphasize the skills needed for particular positions. Then target your audiences with specificity so that you can find these folks who have the skills you're looking for. Part of our role is also to help volunteers consider how they can use their skills in new ways. Are they an accountant during the day? How might they use those same skills in a nonprofit context? Maybe they can help the board with budgeting or assist with an event by providing guidance with the financial planning. If they're a terrific salesperson in their day-to-day, how might they use their skills of persuasion to craft compelling outreach messages or help inspire fundraising appeals? Help them see how they can translate their existing skills to meet the needs of the organization. A second trend is around entrepreneurial or DIY service. DIY, or do-it-yourself culture, is exceedingly popular, and it shows in modern volunteer engagement. More and more people are coming to organizations with their own ideas of what they'd like to do. Now, these may or may not always fit with what the organization needs, so organizations need to be smart about how they engage these entrepreneurial folks. Can you engage them in the role or project they have in mind? Assess their idea and see if it might be a good fit. If it's not a good fit right now, negotiate with the volunteer to see if you can find a complementary role. Build trust in a relationship with them, and this can potentially lead to their project being implemented down the road. Or if the project is simply not a good fit for what your organization does, perhaps something equally entrepreneurial but more in line with what the organization needs can be designed. How do you recruit or engage these folks? Sometimes it's about using broad language. Instead of saying, we need someone to do X, Y, Z, you might say, how would you solve hunger in our community, inviting them to pitch their ideas. Other times, it's about how you frame the recruitment message. You market a specific position, but make it clear you're looking for someone who will partner with you to help the position grow and change as needed to meet the needs of the organization. Either way, you're inviting them in as a partner in change, something that's very appealing to entrepreneurial volunteers. And that third trend is volunteers seeking employment. There is strong evidence that volunteer engagement can improve the chances of gaining paid employment, especially for individuals with high school diplomas or in rural areas. However, this doesn't mean that they're necessarily finding jobs with your organization or the specific one where they volunteer. Instead, volunteering often serves as a gap filler in their resume, providing them with an opportunity to keep their skills sharp and learn new skills, all while expanding their professional networks and staying busy until they find their next paid opportunity. The great news here is that organizations potentially have access to diverse talents and skill sets. The challenge is for us to find ways to market our volunteer opportunities in a way that speaks to folks with these specific motivations. So emphasize the benefits they can gain from these positions. Help them see how volunteering is a great way to spend their time while they look for and after they've gained paid work. Another potential challenge is that these folks might leave as soon as they find paid work, so it's up to savvy volunteer managers to find ways to keep them connected and engaged even after they find a job. This might mean shifting them into more of an advisory role, or it might mean offering incentives like letters of recommendation after they've completed a certain number of hours. Let's look at the second lens now, trends in recruitment media. This is the where and the how of finding our volunteers. Now, social media is at the top of that list, and not surprisingly, social media is an increasingly common place to find volunteers. This can be done through direct recruitment requests, what I call active recruitment, or by building your community of potential volunteers through your sharing of stories and news. I call this passive recruitment. I'll talk more about active versus passive recruitment on the next slide. That said, it's important to remember that whether or not you use social media to actively recruit volunteers, potential future volunteers will see you on social media and see how others actively volunteer with you. This can be a really powerful tool for informing community members on how they can potentially get involved with your work. Now, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, these can all be great places to find and recruit volunteers. However, it is, of course, dependent on your audience. The first thing to ask is your audience on Facebook? Do they use Twitter? Also, your message will need to change to fit the requirements and tone of each one of these platforms. They all have their rules and specific ways in which you can use them. There are also a few differences between platforms. Facebook is good for posting all types of positions, but Twitter tends to be more effective when you're seeking a lot of volunteers for short-term episodic roles, like a cleanup day. Social media is also a great way to amplify the word-of-mouth aspect of recruitment. Posting pictures, sharing results from volunteer events, and tagging your volunteers with their permission, of course, will let your volunteers' friends see that they're involved with your organization and could encourage them to do the same. So this doesn't become a burden, you can encourage volunteers to share and post on social media as well, and then be sure to like and share what they post. Please note, we're going to have a webinar on social media in September, so if you're interested, keep an eye out for that session. And again, we're going to talk more about this passive style of recruitment on the next slide. And then lastly, building on what Salome just talked about, don't forget those other online sites where you can post your volunteer positions. Online recruitment websites like Volunteer Match, Idealist.org, DoSomething.org, Volunteer.gov, and your local volunteer centers can be really highly effective places to spread the word on your roles quickly, broadly, and inexpensively. The second one we have on this list here is outreach via your existing network. Sometimes it really is who you know. The number one reason, still to this day, why people volunteer is that someone asked them to. So find your allies to help you make the ask. Increasingly, volunteer managers are identifying those existing networks to help get the word out to their audiences. You want to talk to retired plumbers? Look for a professional association. You want to talk to students studying marketing? Connect with the marketing department at the local university. Spreading the word through those existing networks can be very effective, and it can be a great way to find and communicate directly with your audience where they're already gathering. Consider also whether you might be able to establish a volunteer sharing relationship with a fellow organization. Maybe you have too many applicants at a time when they need more, or they might get volunteers with a specific skill set that they can't engage, but who would be a great fit for your organization. Reach out to your colleagues at peer organizations, those that do similar types of work, and see if you might be able to establish a volunteer sharing relationship where you both benefit. And the third one on the list here is that face-to-face recruitment. Now, we often talk about recruitment in terms of online posts and emails, and those are very effective, but don't underestimate the power of the face-to-face ask. Depending on the position and your target audience, it can make sense for you or someone else at your organization to participate in public fairs, give short talks to classes or civic groups, or otherwise just be visible in person, out in the community. This is especially true in smaller and rural communities where those personal connections really carry a lot of weight. And then our third one looking at here is the messaging. This is the language we use when we make our ask. Now, I mentioned before passive versus recruitment, specifically when discussing social media. The big difference here is that active recruitment is a specific ask to fill a specific position. We need someone to do X. Alternatively, passive recruitment is less about asking and more about relationship building. Through such media as Facebook, Twitter, newsletters, e-zines, etc., you're sharing the successes and stories of your organization and often the field at large, and you're building trust and a relationship with your audience. There, instead of asking them directly to volunteer with you, what you're doing is priming the pump so that if and when they decide they want to volunteer, they know where to go. This is passive recruitment. As part of passive recruitment, it's important that you not only post your active recruitment posts on sites like social media. If your organization uses social media only to ask for money or volunteers, it could paint the wrong picture and turn people away. You want to make sure you have a broader social media strategy that paints a bigger picture of the organization. Keep your social media sites fresh and share information that might be of interest to your audience beyond just asking them to participate. Positivity versus negativity. Now, we all know of calls to action that focus on the challenges of the world. These can be very effective. However, making the audience sad or mad can also sometimes backfire, making them feel like there's nothing to be done or giving them something called cause or issue fatigue. So many volunteer managers are choosing to also use positive language that focuses on what can be done rather than only what is wrong. Consider your audience and what kind of framework might be most effective. If you work at an animal shelter, for example, Should you focus on the number of animals who suffer in the streets, or should you focus on the successful number of animals adopted? Both of these approaches are valid, and both can be very effective. It just comes down to the culture of your organization, the type of the position, and the audience role you have in mind. And then let's talk a little bit here about tone, humor versus professional. Again, we talked about that a little earlier, but similar to being positive or negative, you might also choose to use humor and a light tone to grab someone's attention. This is especially true where a position is fun or lighthearted. So for example, if you're trying to recruit families, light and humorous may very well be the way to go. However, again, if you're looking to work with someone who's a professional in the field, who has a very specific skill set, you may want to adopt more of a straight-laced professional tone that highlights that need. Again, it really depends on your position and your audience. Also, do be careful with humor that you don't choose a tone that offends or makes too light of serious situations. Instead, try to stay light and accessible if you decide to go the funny route. One overall comment before we move on. Consider how you might be able to engage current volunteers in your recruitment efforts. For example, you might be able to engage them in the process of crafting messages, determining your methods of outreach, and delivering the messages to their networks and others in the community. This way, your current volunteers can develop strategies that will reach other volunteers like themselves with certain skills, availability, representing demographics, etc., and they can help monitor firsthand who they're recruiting as a result.
Great. Thank you, Erin, for all of that information. And now we're going to hear from our next guest speaker. I'd like to introduce Rob Hemphill. Rob is a Midwest native who's now living in Portland, Oregon. Rob has 4 years of experience managing volunteers in a variety of settings. Last year, he was a VISTA member in Washington State, and now he's currently working as a program coordinator for volunteers and outreach at Community Energy Project there in Portland. He's committed to working with volunteer organizations to tackle important issues in his community, and he also serves on the board of a local volunteer managers professional development organization, which is called NOVA. So Rob, let's hear from you now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for including me on this call. As Andy said, I've been doing this work for about 4 years now in a lot of different settings, including working on a political campaign, working in service learning offices, and now working in a nonprofit. And 1 year ago, about 11 months ago, I wrapped up my term as a VISTA, working at the service learning office at a community college in Washington State. And now I'm enjoying life in Portland. As Andy said, one of my roles is to be the volunteer coordinator at Community Energy Project. Here, the majority of our volunteers serve in our in-homes program, where we are installing weatherization materials in seniors' homes. We do this with groups of about 15 people, which is a number that we found works really well for us and for our clients. And the groups come out on a mixture of community days, which are open to anyone to sign up, and corporate group days. For the individuals, our recruitment is very much along the lines of what Salome mentioned and what Erin's been mentioning all along. We post our opportunities on our office newsletter. We post to partners. In Portland, we have a great affiliate called Hands On Portland, part of the broader Hands On network, whose mission is to encourage volunteering, and they post really thousands of opportunities. There's a local resource board called the Community Nonprofit Resource Group, this Synergy, and they put out a daily newsletter and post volunteer and job opportunities, and I would imagine most communities have something like that. If not, you should start one. We also post things like Craigslist. Craigslist actually provided one of our best volunteers we've ever had, and idealist.org. We do a lot of outreach fairs. We do about 20 a year, so once every 2 weeks we're out talking with people, and people will sign up to volunteer there. And from that, I'll maintain a list of people who've expressed interest in volunteering so that if I'm ever really short, I can call through that list and reach out to them. And that's one of my first tips, is make sure you keep that list of people to go back to. One thing that's different than a lot of these other things that have been mentioned on the webinar is that we have a lot of corporate groups that volunteer with us. And for us, this is a really important way for us to use volunteering as a way to build a relationship with a company and with its employees. The employees are an important aspect because there might be a corporate matching program for donations that we can tap into, and increasingly corporate donations are directed by employees who have had experience with the nonprofits. When we work with these corporate groups, we make sure to present our volunteer days as a team building opportunity, as well as a chance for them to do good in the community. will promise to do a blog post with a picture or several pictures of their volunteering day so that they can publicize that, and it's been a really effective way for us to recruit volunteers as well as to raise money. While this talk isn't about what makes a really good experience, building a really good volunteer program is really important for your recruitment. There really is no better recruitment tool than a volunteer that had a good experience. Volunteers are going to talk about their experiences to their friends. This is the passive versus active recruitment that Aaron was just talking about. People are going to hear about your organization through the people that have already interacted with your organization. Think about when you go out for dinner, you're going to ask people what they've heard about a certain restaurant. I want to highlight one example here in Oregon. The Oregon Food Bank has taken to having its volunteers, or encouraging its volunteers, instead of taking a selfie, they take a Helpie and post that to social media while they're volunteering, so that now all of those people in their network are seeing about their volunteering and their smiling faces. I'm fortunate here in Portland to have joined an organization that has a really good volunteering program, and because people know about that, we actually have an issue where we can't find enough places for volunteers to volunteer with us. And so that's a really great problem to have because we know that people want to be with us. But that means that we can think of new innovative ways for volunteers to be a part of our program, and that's a way for volunteers to help with that recruitment. They can go to your outreach events. In fact, they might even know the neighborhoods you're doing outreach in better. It doesn't have to be a staff person. They can also make recruitment phone calls too. I really believe in direct recruitment through phone calls and in-person work, and volunteers can be a part of that. I think regardless of what the role is, it's just important that the volunteers have a meaningful role, and it can be a great way for you to expand capacity in your organization. Lastly, I want to make sure you know that recruitment is really hard work. It's not just a small part of a volunteer event or opportunity. People don't just magically show up, and you really need to hit the pavement. So I want to talk about a little bit of math, so apologies to those that aren't that inclined. I won't get too deep, but I worked on a ballot initiative campaign, and I ran our Get Out the Vote effort in which we hosted 1,500 volunteers over 5 days. We knew that when we made a phone call, we spoke to someone 1 out of 10 times. And of those we spoke to, about 1 in 3 would agree to volunteer. But not only that, of the people who agreed to volunteer, only about 2 out of 3 actually showed up. So let's work backwards. We knew if we wanted 50 people to show up, that we then needed to have 75 people sign up. If we wanted 75 people to sign up, we needed to speak to 225 people. And to speak to 225 people, we needed to call 2,250 people. This isn't necessarily very innovative, but it's what worked for us. We figured out this math, and we stuck to it. And just for what the context is, that's about 40 hours of work, which means that just to get 50 attendees, either one person was doing that full time or we were splitting it between multiple people and volunteers. So the point of this is to say, keep track of what you do. Figure out what's working. Figure out these numbers for your organization. Maybe 1 out of 5 people answer your phone calls. Maybe 3 out of 4 people show up. Regardless, you're going to be able to figure that out and actually budget that time in your schedule. You can also keep track of which messages work better than others. Whenever we have a volunteer come in, we ask about how they heard of us. And so that way we figure out that some methods are more effective than others. And just like you're going to figure out what to budget for your time, make sure you actually budget that time. If it's going to take you 20 hours a week to do recruitment, you need to make sure you do that. And I'll throw in one last plug to not forget to do confirmation calls before the event. That's really going to help minimize the flake rate of people who sign up but don't show up.
Thank you so much, Rob. We really appreciate you sharing what worked for you and some of the tips and suggestions that you've identified. These are going to be really useful to help people when they begin their recruiting. All right, so now we've been talking at you, and now we need you to talk to us. We're going to do a bit of brainstorming together. So on your screen, you see a volunteer position called the e-zine editor. I've also included here a pretty bland recruitment message. It's not very specific, but it's pretty brief. So we are seeking someone to serve as our e-zine editor. They'll help us publish 1 online zine every other month, help us get the word out on our organization's good work. So here's what I want to ask of you. Using your chat window, I want you to first think who could be the potential audiences for a position of this type. And you'll see that question pop up in your chat window now. So thinking about an e-zine editor, who might be the audience for this type of position? Who might be interested in getting this type of experience and developing this skill set in your community? I see journalism students, college students, high school. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of students. Recently laid off journalists, graphic designers, young professionals, communications and PR, students who work on the student paper, artists, anyone who has a blog, absolutely. Technical writers, creative types. Yeah, I'm seeing quite a few for students. Professors as well, absolutely. Very cool. Okay, so let's use college students because college students came up quite a bit. Now, we're going to, again, apply that second lens, which is, where do you think we'll find these folks? We're looking for college students. Where are we going to look for them? And I see another opportunity there. J-School, college newspapers, bars, quite possibly coffee shops, Facebook, College of English, the library, social media, after schools in their classrooms, communications department, entertainment events, the local hangout, college newspapers, campus job sites. These are really great lists. Keep them coming. Fraternities and sororities, absolutely. There's a civic service component for many Greek systems. Poetry readings, why not? We're looking for people who have a literary state of mind. College radio, retirees of journalism experience as well, absolutely. Residence life, absolutely. Okay, so let's say, I saw a lot for going straight to their department, so let's say we're going to go straight to the department. So we have an e-zine editor position. We're looking at college students, and we want to talk specifically, we want to go straight to their department to find them. Let's say it's the journalism department. I saw that one quite a bit. So the next version is, what kind of medium are we going to use? How are we going to talk to them? We can't just show up at the department and sit in the office. Well, you could. It'd probably be not very effective, though. So what kind of medium should we use to make sure we get the message to them? I see flyers. I see in-class presentations. I see making some phone calls, emails, Facebook, MailChimp. I hope that's a person who listens to the podcast serial. College newspapers, campus newspapers, the email listserv for the department, absolutely. Go straight to the staff of the department, the secretary of the department. Social media, ask the career services advisor to send out an email for you. E-newsletters, the radio station again. These are all excellent suggestions. And in fact, one of those things to keep in mind is for this activity, we're just choosing one each time, but all of these would be really effective. Career board, bulletin boards, yeah, bulletin boards are still extremely popular on college campuses. Never underestimate the power of a flyer on a college campus. So we've got our audience, journalism students. We've got our location in their department. We've got a medium. Let's go with flyers that we're going to put on the bulletin boards in the department. So now we're going to think about language. What kind of language might you want to use? Think about who your audience is. What do you think might motivate them? What might be appealing? How might you get their attention? Humor, fun, boost your resume, develop your resume, lighter, talking about benefits, gaining experience, professional development, real-life experience, well-designed, graphic, colorful. Yeah, if we're using a flyer, we want it to stand out among the others. It's exciting. It's good for your resume. Develop your writing style. Stress what they're going to gain from the experience. Keep it brief. List the benefits. I like the use the English that says, does this sign bother you? Meet like-minded people. Practice your editing. Sell the benefits for them. Absolutely. So we've got students here. We know they're interested in this field, and they're looking to gain experience. So we're going to use a humorous or light tone because we know that appeals to this particular audience, but we're also going to really talk about how to get their attention and how they can gain experience for their profession, which is why they're in school. So the last question I want to ask you, and this is a little bigger of an ask, so I'm going to have you get a little creative here, and I already seen a couple. How might you spice up this recruitment message? What would you do to it? Right now it's pretty boring. It just says we're looking for an e-zine editor. They'll help us publish an online zine every other month. What might you add to it to make it more interesting? How might you take this message and, considering our audience, journalism students, considering our medium, a flyer in the journalism school, and considering the tone that you just talked about, humorous but focusing on benefits. Using a hook. Do you love to write? Yeah, grab their attention from the very beginning. It's always a great idea to start with a first sentence that appeals. Use color, use graphics. State what you're looking for, play with words. Make it look like a page out of the journal. Very good idea. Ask them questions. Use pictures, absolutely, especially a flyer because you just don't want it to be a boring piece of paper with words on the wall. Be bold. Talk about the organization's good works. Sell the sizzle. I like that. Want an easy editor, no experience needed. Have you ever thought about becoming an editor? Think outside the box. Focus on the benefits. Bold words, statistics. Mention how this is going to help them practice and develop their own skills. Funny quotes from a movie? Absolutely. That's going to go a long way, especially if you can pull a journalism movie. Again, you're stating the benefits. Join the community of XYZ. Help with XYZ. Yeah, grab their attention and let them know what they're going to gain. Make literary references. Shiny paper totally works every time. I'm going to keep that in mind, Lauren. Thank you for that. Quotes from authors. Yes, I see a lot of trends here with the literary because we know these are folks who are readers and who are writers. Make it purposefully boring as a bad design and then joke about how much they're needed. Yeah, that's a great idea. It's going to grab their attention. An empty box, you fill in the blank. Appropriately used memes, absolutely. Ron Burgundy, you know, why not? Yeah, the editor from Network, I'm mad as hell, not going to take it anymore. These are really great. This is exactly the kind of process you want to do with each one of your volunteer positions, is sit down and just go through each one of these questions with yourself. All right, who am I talking to? How do I want to talk to them? What form am I going to use? What medium am I going to use? What kind of tone? And then just brainstorm. Come up, see what you want to come up with. Now, as we all know, our first draft may not be our best draft, and that's where it's good to check in with peers and make sure that you've captured the tone accurately. But this is a really fun exercise, and I'm so glad that you all participated because it's great to see what this can look like just off the cuff. And what I'm seeing here are several different innovative ways to capture the attention of these students to let them know about this awesome opportunity. So thank you so much for participating in this. So we're going to move on to our summary here. And feel free to keep using that chat window over there because you never know if someone on the call actually is looking for an easy editor and is looking for your help. So to summarize what we've talked about today, remember it's important to consider your audience. Who am I talking to? Consider your location. Where am I going to find them? Consider your media. How am I going to talk to them? Is it a flyer? Is it online? Is it an email? And then considering your tone. What sort of tone, what sort of approach do I want to take to capture their attention? Then recruit using some of those innovations in the field that we discussed. Based on your audience, think about things like emphasizing the skills, the ones that they will gain through the service as well as the ones that they already have and can use. Think about how to appeal to folks who are entrepreneurial or into do-it-yourself service. Think about volunteers seeking employment. What might motivate them? How can you make this appealing to them? The where and the how, consider using social media as a tool to post your volunteer stories as well as to simply share what's going well at your organization. Tap into those existing networks out there. Don't have to do the hard work of finding people if they're already gathered somewhere and you can let them know. And then don't forget face-to-face recruitment. That's still an invaluable way to get the word out to folks. And then lastly, that language and tone, the passive versus active recruitment. Think about ways that you can actively recruit as well as ways that you can just stay on people's radar so that when they're ready to volunteer, they know who to go to. Positive versus negative. Both are valid. Both can be powerful. You might want to use both for the exact same post in two different places. But think through, does it make more sense for me here to talk about what's wrong, or does it make more sense for me to talk about how to make it right? And consider which one's going to be the best fit for what you're seeking to do. And then lastly, that humor versus professional tone. Again, both are really powerful. It just depends on who you're trying to talk to and what you're asking them to do. So really consider which one might be the best fit for that particular ask. As far as next steps, I have a couple homework items I'd love to have you consider doing in the next week. The first one is choose a volunteer position that you already have designed at your organization and brainstorm answers to the following questions like we just did for the one I put on the screen. Who's the potential audience? Where would I find them? How would I recruit them? And then what kind of tone or language would I use? And then repeat it again with another current position, or where possible, try designing a brand new one for which volunteers haven't already been recruited. This exercise is going to give you the chance to keep these skills sharp and keep those trends in mind that we just discussed so that you can bring them to the table and say, all right, so if I want to look for folks with a skill base and I'm looking for students, how might I go through each one of these questions? So I highly encourage you to just practice this for fun, keep it in your toolbox, and then when you're ready and you need it, you can pull it right back out. Before we get to questions, I want to talk very briefly about a couple of resources that I frequently turn to and that I think you'll also find value in. The first is called Energize Inc., and it is hosted by a guru in the field named Susan Ellis. It's a directory of pretty much every topic you can imagine related to volunteer engagement, everything from recruitment to social media to skilled volunteer roles. There's even a section on emerging trends. And there's free online books, articles, trainings, resources there. So it's well worth exploring, especially if you have questions about a specific topic. The second, and most definitely not least, is the on-demand VISTA webinars. There are several really great webinars on these topics that are absolutely worth checking out. And as you know, they're recorded, so you can go back and listen to them. The first one is the one I mentioned earlier, Creating Volunteer Positions That Appeal and Engage. That's a workshop, a webinar that I did a few months ago. And the other one is Using Social Media to Recruit Donors and Volunteers. I mentioned there's a social media workshop coming up in September, but this is one where there's a recording already existing. So you can see the link on your screen there so that you can go straight to the VISTA webinars, the on-demand webinars.
All right, we're going to get to your questions in just a moment. But before we do, we'd like to hear what you think about today's session. On the right side of your screen, you'll find a quick poll where you can share feedback about this webinar. We ask you to take a moment to answer those questions so that we can be able to improve our webinars and get your ideas and input into topics for future sessions. All right, so Erin and Salome and Rob have given us a lot to think about, and now it's time for your questions. As I pointed out at the start of the session, you can ask a question by using the Q&A panel, which is located in the lower right portion of your screen. It's just below the chat window. And now I'm going to ask Robin, our operator, to let us know how to ask questions by phone. Robin?
Yes, thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star then 1. You will be prompted to record your first and last name. To withdraw your request, press star 2. Once again, to ask a question, press star then 1 now.
Great. And while we're waiting for questions to come in by phone, we're going to start with some of the ones that have already come in through the Q&A and WebEx. So first up, Amanda asks, is it better to construct a general volunteer message that has, I guess, several different volunteer positions listed, or to create a posting for each individual position that we're trying to fill? So Erin, let's start with you, and then we'll see if Salome and Rob have any other ideas to add.
Thank you, and that's a great question, Amanda. Thank you for asking it. For the most part, I am an advocate of creating a new post for each position, and the reason for that is that you're probably going to be speaking to different people and different audiences depending on the position. If I'm looking for someone to do administrative work at our front desk and I'm looking for someone to do gardening out in the field, I'm probably going to be talking to different audiences. They may have very different requirements as far as how often they can come in. They're going to have different motivations that's going to lead them to want to volunteer. And it just gives you a lot more flexibility to say what you want to say, speak to the right audience, as well as make clear to that particular volunteer that that position is a good fit for them. You can go into more detail. The exception to that rule is things like big events. I think sometimes when you have a big one-day event where you're asking people just to come in for a couple of hours on a one-time basis, you can highlight the event, highlight what it's all about, and then say, want to get involved? Here are some of the many ways that you can participate in the day. I think that can be very useful, but otherwise I would always recommend creating posts specifically for specific positions.
Great. And Salome and Rob, I know both of you have had a lot of experience with big events and recruiting lots of volunteers. Any additional thoughts on this question?
I think Erin answered this really well. I would just say that I think there are certain messages that are going to work across the board, And that's going to be your 30-second elevator speech about what volunteering at your organization means and why people should be thinking about that. And then you can dive into the more specifics about what that position is going to have. But being clear, people are going to want to volunteer for your organization because they believe in something or they want to do something. That's going to be broader and a way into that deeper conversation.
Great, terrific. Okay, Robin, do we have any questions yet on the phone?
At this time, I'm showing no questions. Once again, to ask a question, please press star then 1.
Okay, and we'll go back to the questions that have come in electronically. Next up, how do you keep volunteer interest high if the volunteer opportunity is not available right now, but it will be in the future?
That's a great question, Andy. I think there's a couple things you can do. One is to use things like social media, do that passive recruitment where you're sharing, hey, look what we have coming down the road. Stay connected to us if you want to learn more about it when it's ready. And just every once in a while send out a little teaser message of, this is coming soon. We'd love to have you participate with us. The other way is for those folks who are chomping at the bit to get started, see if you can identify some complementary ways for them to get started now. You can find other roles where they might be able to get a sense of how the organization works, learn more about becoming a volunteer. It might be something more episodic so that you're not putting in a lot of training for them to do a role and then having them shift as soon as the new one opens up. But it might be, hey, we don't have this yet, but we are looking for folks to help out with serving dinner on Tuesday nights from 6 to 8. Can you come help us out then? And that way you'll stay connected with our organization and you'll know when the new role opens up. Those would be my primary ways of keeping that enthusiasm high for the new role.
Great. And Salome or Rob, anything to add to that response?
This is Rob again. I have this problem a lot. A lot of my work now is very geared towards the winter when we do weatherizing. And so what we try to do in the off season, so spring and summer, is to do various evaluation stuff. So find ways to keep, doing light touches with them. Hey, can you give us some feedback about this? Or is there some experience you can provide as we're updating our programs? We do volunteer recognition in the spring and summer so that they're still, we're appreciating them for what they do. And then I'm actively working to find new opportunities to complement our existing programs so that they can be moving into a more year-round of an opportunity. It's definitely a thing that we have coming up, but I think just having those little ways for them to stay engaged will help sustain that.
Great, thanks, Rob. All right, next up, Lauren asks, the role of my position primarily lies in recruiting foster parents for refugee adolescents coming from Central America and overseas. What sorts of ways can I apply these volunteer recruitment strategies to recruit for this very specific population? So, Erin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because you already have some folks who are doing this role, my very first step might be to reach out to them and say, hey, we're looking for ways that we can reach out to fellow future foster parents. I'd love to hear from you what motivated you to get involved. This is one where the role that the reason people are getting involved, I'm guessing near the top of the list is going to be because they care about the cause or the mission. It's probably going to be less about skill development, less about personal and professional development, and more about I'm moved by what you do and I want to get involved. So I would confirm that you've got that motivation correct by just talking to some of your current foster parents and making sure that yeah, that's what they're saying as well, and then really highlight that in your messages. Highlight the impact of what they can do. Highlight the success stories. For example, if one of your foster parents is willing to share briefly what their story is of what their experience has been like, you can include a sentence or two at the very beginning that says something like, Mary says accepting a foster child into her home was the best thing she's ever done. You can do that too. That's off the cuff. I would word it much better than that, but really highlighting the impact and the power of this type of position and where you can share examples and emphasize that there's a real sense of community, that there are others who do this, you aren't alone, and it's powerful, and we need you. Those are the kinds of things I would really want to highlight for something like this.
Great. Thank you. And then related, Daniel asks, what are some good ideas for recruiting volunteers for one-to-one mentoring, such as Big Brothers Big Sisters? And particularly, he's looking for good ways to recruit male mentors. So any additional thoughts for mentoring?
I would say same thing. Mentoring is another area where it's less often about someone looking for particular skill sets that they're looking to develop, and more about personal experience. Someone was there for them and they want to do the same for someone else, or they're simply looking for a way to contribute. They want to have impact. They want to make a difference. So really highlighting that, where you can highlight stories. It gets a little tricky, and in both cases I should make clear that don't highlight the stories of children without parental permission. That's always important. But you can highlight the experience of the volunteer and say, you know, Ben says becoming a Big Brother was the best thing he ever did, and he's won the state championship. Coming up with some way to highlight the impact aspect of this, that something as simple as 2 hours a week can change the life of a young person. You can be those 2 hours. I mean, finding a way to really highlight that the benefit here that they're going to gain is that sense of fulfillment and that ability to create change for another human being, which is a really powerful moment. So anytime you can use stories to emphasize the larger point of making an impact, I think that's where it really has power.
Terrific. Robin, let's check to see if we have any callers waiting on the line.
Yes, our first question comes from Joanne Kraulick. Your line is open.
Yes, I'm at the location where I'm at. I'm to enlist volunteers for 4 of the programs that we have, and I've created packets with the information of the programs, and I've put a cover letter in there, and also created a thank you letter for when I do the contact person to find out if I can do a presentation with a group. Is this the best route to go? And it's more geared towards seniors.
So sorry, just to clarify, so the packet that you've created, that goes to the teachers?
No, it'd go to a contact person, say at a senior center or someplace like that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so seniors, so it goes to the contact person so that they understand what the program is, and then you can share information, and then is it then you're relying on them to get the word out to seniors to get involved?
No, I've asked to do a presentation to some of their members, to their different groups, to get volunteers, and it would be trainers for the 4 programs that I have.
I understand. Sorry about that. A little confusion. Yeah, I think that's a great idea when it's sort of a brokered relationship that you're seeking someone to allow you entrance to their classroom or their senior center or their community so that you can make a presentation. That can be a really nice way to give them a snapshot of who you are, what it is that you're asking to do. I love that you put a packet together. For some people, they may not have the time to go through a packet, so it might be worth having sort of an elevator speech version as well, where in 30 seconds to a minute you could explain in person or by email of, hey, here's who I am, here's why I'd like to come talk to you, and here's why I think this could be a good fit for your members. You'd really want to emphasize why it would be a good fit for them as opposed to just great for you. But I think having a packet put together, that's definitely going to appeal to a lot of people because it really gives them all the information they need to make a decision about whether it makes sense for you to come talk to them.
Okay. Anything else that maybe I should be doing?
You know, anytime, especially once you've reached out to them and shared a packet, building that relationship with them is one that you can sustain. So it might also be sometimes when I'm building a new relationship, it's meeting with that person over coffee and just saying, hey, do you have a half hour where we could meet over coffee and I could tell you a bit about what we do and why we'd love to come talk to the folks in your community. Sometimes that personal touch can really improve your chances of having the door open for you because there's that honoring of their time as well as seeking to get to know them and building trust with them. So that might be something, depending on how many you're reaching out to, that might be something worth doing as well.
Okay, and the presentation that I've prepared for when I am able to talk to a group, I've tried to make sure it's no more than 10 minutes. Is that the best way?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's perfect. I think keeping it brief, grabbing their attention, and then giving them information on how to follow up, I think that's a great approach.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add, when you do get a volunteer from that, find out what they liked about it, what made them volunteer, and see if you can keep replicating that and move in that direction.
Okay, great. That's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
And at this time, I'm showing no additional questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so next up, here's a question. Rob, I'm going to direct this to you since you have some experience in this area. Peyton says, what is the best way to recruit corporate professionals on an individual level?
That's a great question.
With some corporate groups, and so you might have some insight from that expertise.
Yeah, most of my experience is working with groups, and we usually go through, there's either like an HR person or something like that tends to organize those kind of groups coming from corporate groups. But I would just say that most volunteers, especially anyone over the age of 30, 35, is going to have some corporate connection. And so just remembering that a volunteer brings many skills with them that sometimes they're going to want to apply those things at their day job in the evening. Sometimes they're not, but you can always think about what are they bringing with them that we can tap into and think of unique ways to apply to our organization. But for corporate groups, building new relationships, it's that building relationships component, the networking that you're going to have to do. If you have a board member that might have an in, that's always a great way, or someone else that already knows someone. Going to events, we have things like, it's a great combination of corporate and things here in Portland called Say Hey, that's specifically for young professionals of color. And we will go and just talk with people, and you're not always expecting an immediate return, but you're looking for when the stars align properly that you can make something happen.
And Rob, have you seen any success in getting individual volunteers coming out of those corporate groups that your organization has engaged? If that may be a way, so if for instance, Peyton's organization doesn't have any group events, maybe if they started making those corporate group volunteer opportunities available, it might be a way to then, get those corporate individuals connected with the organization, familiar with what they're doing, and maybe that's a way to pull them in.
That's a great follow. Yes, and the volunteers from corporate groups, we might ask them if they can help do a little bit of organizing on some sort of employee giving program, or volunteer in different ways. So yeah, once people come into your organization, don't let them leave. Keep them coming back. And so I always end every volunteer event with a money ask and a ways for them to stay engaged, and really make sure people sign up then, because I don't want them walking out the door without at least having a chance to stick around.
Great. Good thoughts. Thank you. Next question. With over 30 years of HR experience, I've found it difficult to motivate others to get out of their shells and to reach out and do things. What comments or suggestions do you have to help in this matter? And I guess that's around motivating people to get out of their shells and do things. So Erin, let's start with you.
Well, as an introvert who loves the inside of my shell, I understand where they're coming from. I would say one way is to offer a diversity of opportunities. For some people, the big group gregarious activity sounds like torture. And so if you're not getting a great response to it, may very well be that the opportunities offered just aren't compelling to them or just don't fit well with their own desires. So offer a mix. See if you can offer a number of ways for them to get involved. Some of them might be ways that they can work independently. Some might be ways that they work as a group. Some might be ways that, hey, we need writers, we need proofreaders, we need someone who's willing to, for example, advisory roles are one of my favorites, where you say, hey, I'm looking for someone to take a look at our marketing plan and let us know what you think. Would this appeal to you? Or we want someone to go to our social media, read through it, and let us know, does this seem compelling? What might be missing? Those kind of asks not only appeal to people who may not want to do something more gregarious, but it's also a relatively easy ask. You're not saying, hey, busy person, I want you to take on this role that requires several hours a week. It sounds like a one-time thing, but what it does is it starts to build that relationship and connection with them, and they get a taste of what it's like to help out, and then they might think, well, I enjoyed that. What else could I do? So I would say think about it in a couple of different ways. Offer a diversity of how they can get involved, a diversity of roles, group roles, individuals, some things that are quieter, some things that are louder, depending on their motivations. And then see if you have some easy entry opportunities so that they can get a taste of volunteering, and then hopefully it will inspire them to do more.
Great. And Salome or Rob, anything more that you would add? All right, hearing none. Selena says, I'm not currently recruiting volunteers, but I'm looking to get guests to attend a fundraiser. Would I use a similar method of recruitment?
That's a great question. Some of it you would. You're also getting into event outreach a little bit, because a little bit of it is simply advertising an event and trying to capture people's attention. I think the same thing, some of the same principles apply, though, in that you need to figure out who you're trying to talk to and try as much as you can to steer away from the idea of trying to talk to everyone. You may very well be trying to talk to everyone, but everyone still fits within various buckets that will make it easier for you to try to figure out how to talk to them. So if I want anyone and everyone to attend my event, then I'll start thinking about, okay, my organization works with, let's say, it's an animal shelter. So I want to talk to animal lovers. Where will I find animal lovers? Well, maybe local pet food stores. Maybe I'll find them at other events where people go to gather around animals. Maybe I'll find them at dog parks. I might also want to reach out to people who live in my particular neighborhood. So I might want to reach out through local neighborhood association. I might want to put up flyers at the grocery stores in the area or community centers. The same principles apply of figuring out who you're trying to talk to and then figuring out the how and the where, as well as what kind of tone you want to use. It's a different ask, though, because you're probably really asking for them only to give up their time for one evening, and their level of commitment and what you're asking them to do is much different. Chances are you're asking them just to attend or just to go and have fun. It also leads a little bit into resource development in that you're doing a bit of fundraising here. Chances are your event probably has an entry fee of some kind, or you're hoping for them to do a donation or something along those lines. So I would look into fundraising and into event outreach a little bit just to make sure that the same principles that apply there are also present, but you can certainly use a number of these practices to do your recruitment for an event as well.
Great. And of course, we do have a number of resources on the Vista campus related to fundraising events, so you might find those helpful. Next up, Abby asks, what are some good ways to advertise for a planning-intensive volunteer position like a troop leader for the Girl Scouts?
Great question. So the troop leader position is a good one because there are going to be people who are motivated, again, by the impact question. I want to make the difference in the life of a girl. There are also going to be people who are going to be driven by seeking leadership skills. I want to develop planning skills. I want to develop coordination skills. I want more leadership experience to put on my resume. You've got some real opportunity here to think through these various audiences who might be a good fit and highlight those various lenses. You want to develop leadership skills and make a difference in the life of a young girl? Here's how you can do it. I would really highlight those personal and professional benefits on a position like this, especially because it is a fairly big ask. You're asking for a lot of their time and a fairly sizable commitment as far as a length of commitment. So make the case for them. I think one of the mistakes that often happens in volunteer recruitment is we as individuals care about our mission, and so we automatically assume, well, everyone will care about this. Who's going to say no? Why would you not want to volunteer to do this? What's wrong with you? And the problem with that is everyone has interests and causes that they care about, but there's too many of them for them to step up and volunteer for all of them. And sometimes the tipping point to get them involved is reminding them, oh, here's also what you'll gain from it. There's nothing wrong with a volunteer saying what's in it for me because they can absolutely gain something while they give something. And in fact, as we mentioned before, the best possible scenarios are the ones where their motivations and goals are being met while they're meeting the goals of the organization. So highlight what they can gain from this. Highlight those personal and professional development opportunities to help make the case to them that this is a good investment of your time because you're going to give back, you're going to make an impact, and you're going to gain something that's of real value to you.
I would also add that since it's such a big ask, you can also work people into it through a stepladder type of development. So maybe the first step is that they come just for a single event and volunteer, and then you come back and ask them if they want to do like an assistant leader or something like that, so that they're like seeing the work that's going to have to be done first, and they understand the commitment better, and then you finally ask them into that deeper role. It takes more time, and it's hard, especially on our year-long VISTA schedule, but I think that's how you're going to get someone who really understands the commitment they're making and is really able to step in fully into that role because they have been supported along the way into it.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Rob, and it definitely builds right into the capacity building aspect of VISTA service, because even if you haven't filled, say, all the leadership positions, but you've got a half a dozen people who are, on that stepladder towards leadership, then there's some capacity for the future that can be developed. Okay, next up, Gina says, my organization focuses on the extended learning time in the classroom. However, there are many other similar organizations in the region who are also competing for grants, schools, corporate partners, and volunteers. What can help my organization stand apart from all the rest?
So my answer would be slightly different depending on if we're talking about grants or if we're talking about corporate partners or if we're talking about volunteers. So I'm going to focus first on the volunteer aspect. Specifically, I think one thing, first and foremost, start with what makes you different from the others. You may have a lot of similarities, but chances are you have something that makes you different. Maybe you use more technology tools. Maybe you have a different time commitment. Maybe it's the methodology you use in the classroom that's different from others. Figure out what are your differences, what makes you unique, and then really highlight that, because that may very well, what makes you different may very well be what makes you most appealing to a potential volunteer. I would also say if there are several in your region, focus on the geography of it all. People are often looking for a place to get involved that is near to them, not only because of the ease of transportation, but also because there's a real sense of ownership and belonging when it is in their geographic region. So highlight what makes you local to that particular area. Highlight how you are a part of the community and how just around the corner, just in your own neighborhood, you can come lend a hand and make a real difference for kids in our community. So those would be my two primary recommendations for volunteers in particular is highlighting the differences, what makes you unique, and focusing on the geographic, how you are part of that particular community.
Great.
I'm also going to post a link in the chat that's for a little service by a group here in Seattle called Klaxon Marketing. It's called the Wordifier, and it does a search through a bunch of nonprofits' websites to find out what words we're using too much and what words are unique. And so just using something that's a little bit different is a great way to have that standing out. So that's in the chat, the klaxonmarketing.com/Wordifier.
Great. Thanks for that, Rob. Robin, I just want to check to see if we have any questions on the phones.
We currently have no questions. Once again, to ask a question, press star, then 1, and record your name.
Okay, great. Well, we've got a few more questions already lined up here. So we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can in the time we have remaining. Erin has a situation. She's a VISTA, and one of her major responsibilities is to recruit for volunteers. And so the first step that she's taken is to contact the department heads at her organization to find out if they have a need for volunteers in their specific departments. So far, she's having trouble getting any of them to say yes. She goes on and she's like, well, how could I possibly recruit when I don't have specific volunteer opportunities? So Erin, do you have any thoughts about how she can get department heads to, to think creatively about how they could engage volunteers to support their work?
I do, yeah. And first I just want to say, Erin, you're not alone. This is really common. And it comes from a place, it can come from a number of places. Sometimes they've worked with volunteers in the past and maybe didn't have the best response, so their immediate reaction is say, nope, we're fine here, no thank you. Sometimes they're just so busy and so tunnel visioned that they can't think outside of what they're doing to think what else could be done. And sometimes it is literally just they're not in an imaginative space, and when you ask them, they think, yeah, I'm not sure, nothing right now, thanks anyway. What I recommend for folks who are doing volunteer engagement is do this first step for them, rather than just going to them and saying, well, first of all, do it anyway. It's worth asking, because out of the 10 no's, you may get, oh, the 11th one may be a yes. But approach it slightly differently. Take a look at the various parts of your organization and do your own brainstorming. What do you see that you think a volunteer could potentially do? And when you're thinking about that, not only think of the new things a volunteer can do, but also what are some of the potential things a volunteer could do to take that work off the plate of a staff person so the staff person is freed up to do something else. One of the things we talk about with staff-volunteer relationships is sometimes staff members feel like, well, volunteers get all the fun stuff, and I get stuck with all the day-to-day stuff. Now, the stuff that is day-to-day for that staff person could actually be really exciting and an awesome skill development opportunity for a volunteer working in partnership with them. So identify those ways that a volunteer could do new things, as well as what are some of the current things that staff are doing that volunteers could help leverage. Does the staff person have to put out a newsletter and they hate it with the passion of 10,000 suns, and you think, yeah, you know what, a volunteer could help you with that. You could work collaboratively with them, and they take the main responsibility for moving it forward, and then that frees you up to do the things that you're passionate about. It creates a sense of relationship and partnership with a volunteer as opposed to competition. So I would say start yourself. Do the brainstorming. You know the organization well. What do you see that volunteers could potentially do? And then go back to those same folks and say, I did some brainstorming and I identified a couple of different things I think volunteers can do. What do you think? If you're still getting those, I would ask them questions and say, you know, part of my role here is to see how volunteers can help out. I'd love to learn a little more about how volunteers could potentially work with you, and see if you can learn what their objections might be. Like I said, it could be that they've worked with volunteers in the past and had a bad experience, in which case you can say, well, I'd love to try this new. I'm in the role of serving as the coordinator. I can help facilitate this. Let's see if we can find a better fit. It may very well be they've just never considered it and they're just too busy. And if you say, hey, I'm going to do the bulk of the work here of finding the volunteer and training and orienting them, making sure they're a good fit, they may feel a little more relaxed and a little more into the idea. So take some initiative here, have some fun with it, do some brainstorming, think about what you think volunteers could do, and then go back to them with suggestions, and you may very well get more yeses. And if you're still running headlong into objections, you can always also go up the ladder a little bit and talk to executive leadership at your organization, not to point fingers and say, hey, they said no, but rather to talk about it on a more macro level and say, I'm not getting a lot of response with wanting to engage volunteers, and I'd love to talk with you about how we might be able to change the culture of that at our organization. How can we make it a more positive place and help people understand that volunteers could be really positive for us? And sometimes executive leadership can be the one to really make the case and say, hey, folks, this is why volunteering matters. We know that we need volunteers. We know we need community support. And Erin is here to help us make that happen, so let's all think of ways we can connect with volunteers. So if you're feeling stuck in the corner, try the initiative way, try to come up with ways on your own, have the conversations about why there might be objections, and if you're still hitting a wall, then see if you can engage executive leadership to be your partner in this effort.
All right. Next up, Chisato says, my organization provides services to clients who are dealing with high-risk issues like domestic violence, chemical dependency, and others. What are some strategies for recruiting effective volunteers for positions that require an extensive background check?
That's a great question as well, and extensive background checks are really common anytime volunteers are going to be working with what we call vulnerable populations, and that includes children, that includes homebound seniors, and that of course includes high-risk situations like the ones that you've described. Again, I think what you're talking about here is highlight the personal professional development opportunities, highlight the fact that they can make a real difference for people who are in a vulnerable spot. As far as the extensive background check, honestly, I would just be very upfront about it. I would mention it upfront that we trust our volunteers. We rely on them. Background checks are required. Make the case for why they're required. In order to protect our clients, we do require background checks. Make it clear that it isn't that we don't trust you, the volunteer. It's that we're protecting our clients. Anyone who wants to volunteer for your organization and knows what you do should be on board with that. And if they're objecting, saying, no, 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 you're just trying to check me out, then they're not going to be a good fit. So typically with things that may be barriers, including background checks and pretty substantial time commitments, my rule of thumb is transparency. Just state it up front, but also explain to them why you need it. You need it to protect your clients. It isn't that you don't trust them.
This is Salome. I also have a couple more suggestions. I would think that this is a good opportunity to check out your local university or college department. Perhaps there's someone studying social work or psychology or something that's looking for an internship. You know, these people are more likely to be a little bit more long-term if you don't want to have, you know, onesies and twosies and have to do extensive background checks on people who are only going to be there for 1 to 2 sessions. It would help to just, you know, find volunteers who are willing to stay for the long haul and give them the incentives such as college credit or writing it down on the resume or something like that. And also check out other agencies that might be doing something similar. You could also ask people on the Vista campus, you know, who else is dealing with high-risk clients and see what strategies they're using as well.
Great. Thank you, Salome. And I want to thank everybody for your questions and participation today. We've had a lot of great discussion here, but we're reaching the end of our time. And before I let everyone go, I do want to let you know about our next upcoming webinar. It's on considering your career options. It's coming up August 20th. And so whether you're just starting out in your VISTA service term or whether you're about to wrap up, it's never too early to start thinking about career. This session is going to introduce some ideas and strategies that you can use to engage in career exploration and development both today and in the future. You'll be getting an email about it with an invitation to register, but you can always check the webinars page under Connect and Learn on the Vista campus to sign up for this and all other future webinars. So we hope to see you again soon. And I do want to thank our presenters today, Dr. Erin Barnhart, Salome Clark, and Rob Hemphill for all of their work and contributions in putting together today's session, and then to thank our producer, Sam Graziani, as well as my colleagues, Jess Knight and Andy Clark, for their support today. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andy, and thank you for being here.